Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm hoping you can hear me, and if you can, could you please type into the chat? Because as soon as you do that, we can get started. I know there's a bit of a delay between the time I say it and the time you hear it, so I have to sit here very patiently, waiting to see if you can hear me. I can see you all filing into the room, so that's good. But hopefully you can hear me. Oh, there we go. It would help if I had the chat open. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And so I'm glad you're here. I've got some, I think, cool information for you. And so I will get started. I'm just going to pull up the screen share. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to post a link into the chat. This will take you to the page where you can find the PDF slides and the references. And if you need the quiz for CEUs, it is there as well as you'll be able to once you complete the quiz. It's only 3 questions. It's just to verify listening. But you can also download a certificate to verify that you attended. So you can use it for your CEUs. So this is the link, and there you go. Okay. So welcome, everyone. We're going to be talking about the neuroscience of change. And I do want to preface this conversation. You know, we're not neuroscientists, and there's a limit to how much of this we actually need to know. So what I've tried to do is, again, just do the basics here so that we get a reason, so we can have some more understanding as to the behavior that we often experience with clients, or maybe it can be about ourselves. It doesn't really matter. And the important thing, of course, is not so much how we work, it's what do we do to aid the process. So we'll get to that at the end of the presentation. Oops, I have to go back over here. Okay, so this is our agenda. We're going to talk about the concept of change, how habits are formed, the role of beliefs in behavior, neuroplasticity, and then, as I mentioned, we'll talk about how we can make changes or help our clients make changes. And it'll make sense when you hear the science of the brain. Okay, so we're asking clients to change all the time. There's really no point in them coming to see us if they don't make some decisions to do something differently than they have been doing. And we are also always making changes too, whether we're working on our own selves physically, or even with regard to our businesses, or making decisions about what we want to do with, our nutrition information, or just in life in general. Change is what we're all about. So we're going to be doing this all our lives, all our business life, all our regular lives. Doesn't really matter. Change moves things along. Now, if we don't make changes in our business, we don't have a business, because if the business is working reasonably well, you have to keep up. You always have to keep up, and you always have to adapt to the way the market goes. And it's very similar with health issues, in that if you don't keep up to what could be possibly making a difference for you or for a client, it's not going to happen. And of course, if clients don't change, their health issues are going to remain the same. So we talk a lot about how the emotional affects the physical, but I wanted to know, what's the path for emotions to the physical? I want to know what it is. What is it? What actually happens in our brains that determines what we do or don't do? And of course, I want to know, how do they connect? So the good news is that research is providing some answers for all of this, and it affects how we make changes or not. So the first thing we have to look at is change itself and why we're resistant to it. And this is where the brain chemistry comes in. So we do have people come to us. They say they want to make changes. They say they want to get help, but yet they are resistant. They are either verbally resistant to you right there to your face, like, oh no, I can't do that, or no, that won't work, or they intend to make change and it doesn't happen. And we do the same things ourselves. So change starts with uncertainty. We're never sure what the outcome is going to be once we make the decision to change. Oops, why did that freeze? Well, there we go. We also don't like uncertainty. It's not where our comfort zone is, but it has more to do with how our brain is functioning that is causing the way we feel and the sense of uncertainty. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, this is not just about our emotional feelings about the process. It is actual brain chemistry and how we were made in order to survive. However, emotions are playing a big role because our emotions contribute to the feelings of uncertainty. So, as I said, we're talking about change creating these feelings of uncertainty. And it involves the threat response or fight or flight. So when we are in when we are in fight or flight, we have our resources are moved from the frontal cortex. And this is a big piece of the puzzle. So in the frontal cortex, this is where we do all the planning and deep thoughts. This is when we can sort out, all the different aspects of a concept and what we should do or not do, or what we feel or what we think, or all those sorts of things are all in the frontal cortex. But when you're in the threat response, you're in a hurry, in theory, because it's supposed to be for physical danger. And so it gets shunted out of the frontal cortex. And this is where a lot of the uncertainty feeling comes from, because now you're in an unknown territory and you can't really think as deeply as you might like. So we're in survival mode. This, of course, increases the anxiety and fear that we may experience when we're thinking of change. It also reduces the ability to focus and think clearly. And this can impair performance and increase emotional response. So that's what's often happening just with I'm not even going to say the thought, but the commitment to make change. For some people, it's the thought alone, but for others, they actually have to be, they have made the decision, now it's going to happen. So I'm going to ask you a question here, and you can type in the chat. Does all change come with uncertainty? Is there any change examples that you can think of that wouldn't make you feel uncertain? Anything? Just type in the chat. So I thought about this quite a bit, and I was trying to think of something that, first thing I thought of was like moving from one house to another. Is that there any uncertainty there? Well, there's no uncertainty that you're moving, but you might feel uncertain as to how you feel when you get into the new house. Carlos is saying, not if the change is clearly defined and measured. Yeah, but are there any changes where that's possible? Like, aren't most changes described with a caveat where they say, something like, we can't give you any guarantees, but this is the most likely way, things are going to unfold. Things. When you think about this, like almost, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that you could say for certain. Barb says all change has some uncertainty. Danielle says, I'd say it all comes with uncertainty. Stacey Ann, same thing. Same. Okay. Then she repeated it. And if we choose the change versus having it forced on us, but you still don't know the outcome of the change for sure. You know why you chose it. You know what you hope is the the outcome, but you don't absolutely know what the outcome is until the outcome has happened. And as Heather says, you're never fully in control of outcomes. Debbie says, nothing is uncertain, guaranteed, therefore all new things are unknown and come with uncertainty. And that's the reality. Now, of course, and Mary is saying the same thing. Of course, there are some things where the uncertainty of it isn't very scary, right? It's not looked upon as a gamble. It's not coming with some kind of, like when you go in for surgery, there's an uncertainty that comes with some potential harm or danger. But generally speaking, if you decide to buy a new car, that's not nearly as worrisome as, having surgery. So Ola says you want to humor God and tell him your plans. Well, I guess that would depend on your belief system. And again, beliefs come into this big time. So, all right, let's go back to this. So when the brain senses change, it sends out signals from the orbital cortex that something is not normal. And it's closely connected to the amygdala. And amygdala is associated with emotions and fear. So it's not, it makes sense that you feel something emotionally and that you may have some fear towards a change. The signals distract from the focus to the change and instead reinforce keeping things the same. So in other words, these signals that are coming from the orbital cortex are actually trying to distract you so you don't make the change. It's trying to keep things the same. Now, there's something called attention density, and it refers to how much we pay attention to something. And making a substantial change requires a high level of attention density on the new idea. So you're focusing on new ideas or activity actually helps you make new brain connections. And it builds the longer we focus on the change. So if you have enough attention density for the new thought or habits, then they become part of you. And this was quite interesting to me because I don't consider myself the most disciplined person in the world. I can give you numerous examples of my, not necessarily getting things done in the efficient manner that I could. But when it comes to habits, I'm pretty good. And I would say about 2 years or more ago, I have a rebounder, a mini trampoline, and I jump on it every morning for 15 minutes. I used to do it longer. And then as life got busy, I ended up not doing it. And I thought, 15 minutes is better than no minutes. So into my morning routine, which is pretty standard. I get up, I do my ablutions, I feed the cats, I take my supplements, and then I head to the rebounder and start jumping on it before breakfast. And on many occasions, I have gotten up tired because maybe I had a bad night's sleep or I didn't get enough sleep, or maybe I did something very physical. If I have to clean the whole house or something like that, I don't feel that great the next day. I'm a little stiff. And I'm like, okay, you don't have to jump on the rebounder today because I really don't feel physically like I should do it. But I get into my routine, and as soon as I put the dishes down for the cats, I find myself heading to the rebounder and jumping on the rebounder. And I'm like, I thought I said I didn't have to do this, but here I am doing it. And it's because of the way my brain has been trained for this habit. It is a habit now. It's not a choice. It's a habit. And I'm not going to say I do it every single day, but I will say that probably in the course of a year, I miss maybe 6 days. That's how much I do it, as a habit. So this makes sense to me. This makes a lot of sense to me as to, how we can be hardwired to do something good or bad in terms of what we do on a regular basis. So as I mentioned before, the prefrontal cortex is where we think. It determines good and bad, helps us plan the future and possible consequences of our actions. It also allows us to work towards our goals. There we go. Change is initiated in the prefrontal cortex. So this is where the decision is being made. And it's where we learn new activities. It has limited resources and it gets tired easily. So we often talk about when we're working with clients of not overwhelming them, not trying to change too much too soon. And this is why, because they can only sort of reason through the potential changes in the prefrontal cortex, and it doesn't like it if there's a lot of things they have to think about. So that's a very key point, that the prefrontal cortex can only hold a few ideas at a time. So then this is where the basal ganglia comes into the picture. It's very important for long-term habits. It's activated by repetitious actions and behavior. So when I jump on the rebounder, it's my basal ganglia telling me to get up onto the rebounder and start jumping. And then these brain circuits have been formed by repetitive actions. And therefore, less energy is required as it's defined by experience. So in other words, the brain is trying to save some time and energy, and this is why habits kind of get shunted out of the prefrontal cortex and into the basal ganglia. We use our working memory to process new information, and this, of course, is more work for us. So we need to have some sort of system where the things that don't require a lot of, working memory, because we know how to do them, it has some other place to operate from. I was always impressed. I don't remember what documentary I was watching, but they were talking about figure skaters and how when a figure skater does, a double or a triple jump, there are so many commands being made at once for them to do that. It takes a few seconds for them to make that jump, but they have used so many different muscles and so many different things going on in their brain. It's because of the repetition that they can do it so smoothly. And I was always struck by that, about how powerfully we can be doing something physically, or even, how we behave or whatever. And we don't necessarily have to have a lot of conscious thought for it if it's something we do all the time. So for repetitious activity is the basal ganglia that's taking over, and it's freeing the prefrontal cortex for new information. Because the habit, whether it's good or bad, is hardwired into the brain, it makes it difficult to change. And we have so many habits, many of them operate on a subconscious level. That's what's going on with the figure skater. They are not, there's no consciousness to those jumps other than they make the decision to make the jump. And it makes it even more difficult to change. So the basal ganglia, which is in the striatum, this is what's happening when we have our habits there, when we form our habits. So first of all, excitatory neurons fire at the onset of the behavior, and they fire again when it's done, and this signals that the task is complete. And in between the beginning and the end, there are interneurons that activate and prevent the other neurons from initiating another task. So in other words, there's something, I won't say forcing you to do the activity, but keeping you focused on what your habit is. And this is part of the hardwiring of the habit. Now, if you're going to change, it's dependent on the way the brain is set up to function, the emotional perception to the change, and then the belief system around the behavior and need for change or ability to change. So beliefs play a big role in how behavior can assist or not assist the changes that someone is trying to make. Okay, so here's a controversial question. Is your nutrition knowledge based on facts or beliefs? If beliefs play a role in how you behave or what you know or what you think or how what you eat or what you do, is this based on facts or beliefs? If I'm talking about you right now, you personally, what you think is your nutrition knowledge, are they based on facts or are they on beliefs? Like, is this what you believe to be true? Or is this what you know to be true? Type in the chat. What do you think? We got both. Facts and research. It's a combination of facts and beliefs. Carol says, can it be some of both? Mostly scientific, but also beliefs are substantiated with success. Sarah saying more facts since going to school, but still both. Alice says facts. Also, facts and nutrition are ever evolving and changing. That is true, Christina. Well, here's the thing. Most of you, and this is a really hard one to wrap your head around. Most of you, and myself included, don't know 100% that a fact is a fact. Now, especially when it comes to nutrition knowledge. For reality, like for example, if the sky is blue, you know for a fact the sky is blue when you look at it. Okay, and don't get me into what it's refracted light or whatever the heck it is. I just mean if somebody says, oh, that's a blue sky, and you look up and you see it's blue, okay, that's a fact, right? It snowed on Monday. That's a fact. This is something that we can verify for ourselves, and therefore they are facts, right? But there's a lot of nutrition facts that are not necessarily facts. They are theories, right? And a lot of times theories get passed around like they're facts, and then we get taught these theories, and then in turn, we think they're facts. We come to believe they're facts because of the environment that we learn them, right? So there's many things in nutrition world, and you can pick to any subject within the scientific world as well, because, you know, even they do not, if you research, they don't claim the results of their study indicate facts. They call them scientific truths, and they're not facts per se. They are what was observed and therefore what it could possibly mean. So Deetria was saying, I was going to say that many facts are formed through beliefs. That is true too. So this is important because if you're working with a client who has beliefs they think are facts when it comes to food or nutrition or their health issues or why they can't change or what their life is, you know, they don't see them as beliefs, they see them as facts. And so this is, I think, an important concept that we have to sort of come to grips with, that a lot of what we think are facts are beliefs or versions of the facts. They're not perhaps 100% fact. There may not even be a way to prove that they're facts. One of the examples that was in the research course that I took was that you can't prove that gravity exists. There's no measurement for gravity. There's, you know, all you can do is take something and, you know, you're holding it, let go and see it fall to the ground. You could do that 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, but you never know that there might be that one time it finally learns not to fall and hit the ground, and it doesn't hit the ground. You can't say for sure. And that, again, that's a research perspective. You talk to any researcher, they will tell you this. There's a limit to what we know as facts. And that's just, I'm just talking about, you know, basic things here. So when we're working with clients, we are working with their beliefs, and it is really difficult to try and get someone who believes something is a fact to see it as a belief or as a theory. I like to use the word theory because it takes the pressure off. It isn't something where you're saying, no, you're wrong, right? You're just saying, okay, this is a theory. It, you know, hasn't necessarily been proven, and therefore, you know, this is how it, you know, it's been circulated, and this is where it came from. And I find that people tend to respond to that better than trying to say, you know, well, no, that's not true, or that's not the way it is, because we don't know for sure. And then the other issue, and this is important, is when you are dealing with someone's beliefs, you have to be very careful, because sometimes those beliefs are coping mechanisms. Sometimes those beliefs, like I've met people who buy really cheap supplements and they will swear that they get a benefit from them. So who am I to tell them that they should buy something better if they think and believe, and we've seen this with the studies on placebo effect, that they could literally be getting a benefit because they believe that supplement will help them. So we have to be very careful with beliefs. All right. So Isaac Newton came up with the law of inertia, and it's about an object will continue to be in a state of rest or in a state of motion unless an external force acts upon it. In other words, until there's an external force to cause a change won't happen, whether it's, not doing something or it's doing something. As a survival mechanism, our bodies work best when energy is used efficiently with as few calories as possible. And the autonomic nervous system monitors how we use energy to ensure our muscles work properly. So there's something called cognitive inertia, and it's the tendency to resist change and ignore new information that contradicts prevailing beliefs. So for most people, if their beliefs are their beliefs, they will ignore anything that will tell them otherwise. I don't know how many conversations or, posts in Facebook I've seen where something, I just saw one yesterday. It was a negative critique of the Dirty Dozen that is created by the Environmental Working Group. And so someone posted it and said, well, what do you all think of this? And I've seen many posts like this. It could be a study result. It could be anything. And of course, what the response is, well, it's probably paid for by someone, or it's they're not looking at this, or, they're trying to find anything that is going to allow them to maintain what they think about whatever's been, whatever is being criticized. They want to keep thinking that the criticism isn't valid. And that's cognitive inertia. And it's a normal thing. If you believe in the 15 clean and it's 12 clean and the dirt 15, I don't know what it is. Clearly, I'm not a big fan of it because I can't even say it. But I did put in a comment. I don't usually put in a comment because it annoyed me the way it was being critiqued, because basically they were saying there's no evidence that, avoiding those dirty dozen and clean 15. There we go. Now I remember that, avoiding those 12 foods that are on the dirty dozen will have a health benefit. And I'm like, whoever said it would? Like, there's so many factors that go to showing a health benefit. This is about, what are you doing to eliminate as many chemicals out of your daily life as you can? And this is a way, right? That's one thing you can do. It's not the only thing, and it shouldn't be the only thing. And nobody ever said, there's nowhere you would see, either from the Environmental Working Group or anybody who advocates for those, that this is somehow going to make a health difference in a tangible way that can be done in a study. It's never going to exist. It's never going to happen. And that, of course, is the cognitive inertia of the person who posted it in the first place. So we have cognitive inertia when we're being challenged on something that we believe. And this guy, whoever, or girl, I don't know who it was who wrote this and posted it, has a cognitive inertia against the dirty dozen and is not willing to look at, the bigger picture. So I think that we see that a lot, and we're going to be dealing with that with a lot of clients when you are trying to suggest they do something that is the opposite of what they believe they should do. Because a lot of clients come in, they are confused and they are looking to do new things, but there's also some things that they do that they think are just fine. And it's when you go for those that you might come up against this. So habits we keep are based on beliefs, and we believe that what we're doing is a good thing. That's the key to the belief. Or if we don't believe it's a good thing, we believe it's something we can't do without, that it must exist. We must do it. We must have it. We must, right? So what is the belief for someone who smokes cigarettes? I don't think there's anybody on the planet, well, maybe somewhere, but in North America anyway, in the Western world, I don't think there's anyone who thinks cigarettes are good for them physically. So what do you think the belief system for someone who smokes cigarettes is that is preventing them from quitting? Type in the chat what your thoughts are. Because let's face it, that it can't hurt them. That's a possibility, absolutely, Heather. Especially if they're of a certain age and say, well, I'm alive now and I haven't died yet. I've heard people say that. What else could they believe? Someone just likes to smoke and they enjoy it. Yep, they could believe, you know what? I know it's bad for me, but it's my life and I enjoy this and I want to do it. More of I don't care attitude, going to enjoy myself regardless. Yep, it helps them deal with stress. That's a big one, Barbara. They are the exception to the rule. Yeah, they could believe that. They can say, yes, I'm addicted. There's nothing I can do. They can say, you know what, it calms and relaxes me. So, that's the important thing. That's what Melanie was saying, that they need them to cope with stressors in their life. Yep, they say that too. Can I get through their day without it? Relieve stress, coping mechanism. Okay, a lot of you are saying that. They're going to die anyway, whether they smoke or not. Sometimes they don't care because it's an addiction, right? I don't think it's that they don't care. It's that they are comfortable that it's an addiction. That, okay, it's an addiction. I have a reason, right? So yeah, there's a lot of you with the stress aspect, which is a biggie. I've come across that with a number of smokers. And they do it for anxiety and relaxation. For some, it's to lose weight. For some, it's to fit into a group. For some, it's just to have it and send, I don't know what that says, addicted for done. It helps them cope. I guess we can figure that out. There's a satisfaction that maybe comes from it. Yes. You can die crossing the street. Weight gain. They're afraid of it. Yes. They're hopeless to change, though they feel hopeless to change and are people that cannot embrace change. And finally, yes, acceptance in certain environments. They may feel that they are more accepted if they do. Certainly when people are young, if they're that, I remember that pressure. They believe they will gain weight. So you get an idea that there's how strong the belief can make them choose to not do something that they may find difficult that could be good for their health. And I picked cigarette smoking because it's okay, Stacey, and I do the same thing. So it's very common. Typos are common. So yeah, you can see how their belief can limit their ability to make a change as simple as quitting smoking, because many people have quit smoking. So it's certainly something that's possible. So when you come across somebody who can't, you have to understand where they're coming from a belief perspective that may stop them from doing that. So when you have behaviors like smoking and beliefs, they reinforce each other. The more you're invested into the belief, the less likely you're going to give it up. So the more they have that, I can't cope without it, I'm too stressed, or, I'm going to die anyway, or, whatever it is, the more they invested in that, the less likely they're going to quit. And in order to change your habits, you need to change your beliefs to accommodate the new behavior. So something in them has to decide that whatever they feel about whatever smoking's doing for them, they have to have a belief that it's not worth it anymore. And you may have seen this kind of behavior when clients are resistant to your suggestions. I've certainly sat with, I remember one client, and he only ate 5 foods, had raging migraines, and every suggestion I made, he had a reason why he couldn't do it. And it wasn't hard to sort of see, sort of where he was stuck. And he was under a lot of stress, and you could see that whatever he was doing, he was clinging to it because it was where he felt safe. So this brings us to neuroplasticity. So a lot of what we need to be able to do involves neuroplasticity, and we have to have good neuroplasticity in order to change habits. So we used to believe the brain was fixed after childhood and it didn't have the capacity to change. And so neuroplasticity refers to the ability of the brain to change its structure and how it functions. So literally, we can make new pathways, we can change how the brain functions, and therefore anything associated with our habits can change. Our thoughts, experience, behaviors, and emotions contribute to this change. So we can never separate out emotions or what we've learned or not learned. Or any behaviors that we regularly engage in and how we think. But the good news is that neuroplasticity makes the brain quite resilient. However, it can also be vulnerable to outside and inside influences. So again, that could be our emotions. It could be what the people that we surround ourselves with on the outside. There's a lot of different ways that our brain can be influenced because it is so, or can be so plastic. So there's 2 types: functional plasticity, which refers to the brain's ability to move functions from one area of the brain to another. So this is what they're seeing in the case of brain damage, how some of the functions are regained because new pathways are formed and they're operating in a different part of the brain. And then there's structural plasticity, and it refers to the brain's ability to change its physical structure when learning occurs. So again, that would be brain chemistry and how we learn. And the more plastic the brain, the easier it is for the brain to adapt to new information. So basically, you have neuron connections that we are using when we think a certain way or we do things. They are being strengthened. So when neurons are used often, they become stronger depending on what the connection is. So there's these connections that are determining certain behavior types or thought patterns or brain function or brain to physical body functions. These neuron connections are strong when they're used often. And when we don't use certain ones, they get pruned, so they're eliminated. And this is part of the plasticity ability. And what this does is allow the brains to adapt to changes in our experience or environment. New experiences can strengthen existing connections, or they can create new ones. So when you are trying to help your clients make changes, if you can get them to experience something as part of their protocol in terms of how they're going to approach this learning, it actually will help with either the connections that need to be there or help them create new ones. So these are the benefits of neuroplasticity. First of all, helps us learn new things. It supports existing cognitive abilities. It aids recovery from strokes and brain injuries. It helps with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's prevention. Now, again, there are other factors, but this is one that they constantly state about using the brain. It can strengthen areas of the brain if some functions are lost or decline. So, in other words, we can get back what we had if the brain has neuroplasticity. And of course, improving neuroplasticity can boost brain fitness. So how cognitively sound a person is, or quick they are, or how well they can reason. All of these things fall into the neuroplasticity category. So the key is to use the brain to keep it plastic. And again, when you look at a lot of people who get into a routine and their job is routine, their life is routine, how much are they using their brain? How much new information are they receiving? I was having a conversation today with my sister-in-law and my niece, because my niece, it's her 1-year anniversary of having quit smoking. And so we were talking about smoking and how it's what a lot of people do when they're bored, right? They're nervous or they're bored, or it's something to do. You're not just sitting there, you're not fiddling, you're smoking, right? And I said, well, thank goodness for the computer, because the computer, that's what I do. The computer is what I do to not be bored. So I could be watching television, but the plot's not moving fast enough, and I'm doing something on my keyboard, looking stuff up. And again, I'm getting exposed to a lot of new information. Some of it's good information, some of it's not so good. But at least the computer gives us an easy source of information if we want to learn new things. All right, so there's something called the anticipatory dopamine release, and dopamine is part of the neuroplastic change. The first time something new is experienced, dopamine is released after the event. As the event is repeated, dopamine is released earlier and earlier. And eventually, just the thought of the experience releases the dopamine. When dopamine precedes the event, it motivates the person to perform the behavior. And then, of course, with repetition, this strengthens the behavior. So dopamine is involved with this as well. And as you know, this is our neurotransmitter that helps us with motivation, and can be very positive in many circumstances. There's also something called BDNF, stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it plays an important role in the survival of neurons and their growth. It modulates neurotransmitters, it's essential for learning a memory, and it helps maintain neuroplasticity. And of course, you knew I had to bring in gut bacteria. And it's not just gut bacteria, I might add, it's all microbes in any microbiome in our body, influences BDNF and serotonin levels. Further to the gut connection, researchers are making connections between microbes and brain function, and psychobiotics refer to pro and prebiotics that can support brain health. Foods that help this are grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables. These help support good gut bacteria composition, which aids brain function. And this is what is recommended for neuroplasticity. And when I read that list, I kind of smile, because I'm sure you've heard of the book called Grain Brain, a book I don't like at all. But I think it's ironic that you've got the researchers recommending grains for good brain function, and someone running around saying, no, don't eat grains, for it's going to mess up your brain, right? So when we look at this list, this is good news, right? Because these are the kind of things that we like to recommend. So in terms of the stress connection, neuroplasticity can work for the good or for the bad. So the HPA axis stimulates the hippocampus, amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex, along with BDNF, because neuroplasticity occurs in all of these areas. So this, again, the HPA axis is what activates your stress response. And this can help create long-term memories from a stress experience. And this is what contributes to PTSD. So neuroplasticity is essential for cementing the memory, which is a good thing if it's a good memory, but it's not a good thing if it's a bad memory. Stress also plays a role for neuroplasticity. Extreme or chronic stress can decrease BDNF. It also affects the ability to make decisions in the prefrontal cortex. So when you are in fight or flight, you are not in your prefrontal cortex, and you are making short, quick decisions. And again, this is very common in those. Some people get stuck in fight or flight, let's put it that way. And so like the smokers that we were talking about, one of the reasons they have trouble quitting, even though logically in their prefrontal cortex they can come up with numerous reasons why they should, is that they are receiving signals from their emotional center, their fight or flight response centers, saying have a cigarette now, have it now, have it now, have it now, have it now. And of course, they're getting this all day long. And this is one of the reasons why it's so difficult for them to stick with their prefrontal cortex reasoning and make the change, because they keep getting the signal that they have to react right away. Now, you could also have damaged dendrites in the prefrontal cortex that can also interfere with the ability to make good decisions, and this is due to chronic stress as well. And what it happens is a person becomes reflexive, so they're kind of reacting instantly instead of being reflective, which means they're thinking about things. This makes it harder to decide to make changes or make the changes themselves. Mental stress is a source of also inflammation in the brain, and it's caused by neuronal activation. It can cause pain in the body and throughout the body, or increase the perception of pain. So this is also not making it easier to make decisions. Now, inflammation is not necessarily bad. It's going to depend on the level. All right, so now that we kind of have that understanding, what are we going to do to make changes, to help people make changes? So you understand that bad habits can be replaced with good habits. It's easier to replace the bad habit with something new than it is to completely stop the bad behavior. And this will, of course, change the brain. And it requires ongoing focused attention on new possibilities and new behaviors, not the problem. There has to be a real commitment and an effort over time. Habits can be broken and the new ones form when new neural pathways are created in the brain. And building alternate neural pathways can break old habits and build new ones. So here's what you want to think about. When trying to break a habit, figure out what triggers the dopamine release. Then avoid it, right? Can be in a small way so as to not overwhelm or change the environment. So if somebody can tap into, I'll keep using the cigarette one because it's a good example, that little feeling they get that's going to tell them to have a cigarette, what triggered that little feeling? It's usually anxiety. It's usually butterflies in the stomach. The same with overeating. What thought triggered that? Can you avoid that thought? Can you focus on something else? This is where mindfulness training really comes. Mindfulness is very good for all of what we're talking about. Because mindfulness keeps you focused on the present, not anything from the past or anything in the future, and it lowers anxiety. Obviously, you want to lower stress. It's easier said than done. Current brain plasticity can affect the ability to lower stress with standard techniques. If you're one of those people, or you have clients who they don't relax when they breathe deeply, they can't meditate, they can't do any of those things, it's just not helping. It could be because of their brain plasticity. And chronic stress can inhibit the brain's responsiveness. So again, it's going to be the fact that they don't have a plastic brain is compounded by the fact that they've been stressed for so long. You want to pay attention. So stay in the prefrontal cortex for new activity. Otherwise, the brain reverts back to the old pathway as soon as focus is lost. Again, this is where mindfulness training comes in. You want to think small. So small steps require less willpower, which uses serotonin. So this is what we need. We need serotonin for good willpower. Those suffering from depression due to low serotonin often have trouble making changes. So why are small activities so important? To have focus and activate key brain areas, you must be in a state of flow. And this is a state of consciousness where we are completely immersed in the task. Flow is easier to accomplish when a new activity must have a clear set of goals and progress. It must result in immediate feedback, and it must be balanced between perceived challenge and the perceived abilities of the person so that they have confidence. So when you create a small task, and if you've listened to me before, I talk a lot about this with experiential learning, the small task is usually easy to do for the person. So that's the perceived abilities. And they're going to get it done sooner because it's a small task. They're going to get the immediate feedback. And of course, because it's a small task and it doesn't have a lot of, different things that have to come into play, it's pretty easy to set a clear goal and determine what the progress would be. So small activities are the way to go in trying to help clients change. You want to break everything down into as small as they need, not as small as what you think is small, but as small as they need. And the best way to do this is to obviously talk with them and then let them choose what they think they can do. So to be in flow, a person must know the purpose of the activity, prepare the mind, and have control of the environment. They have to do the task with no expectations, don't get sidetracked by anything, and become completely immersed in it. They need to see what it feels like, right? So they're experiencing the task, getting the insider's perspective. They need to enjoy the process. And this is why experiential is so much better, because it is an enjoyable thing, because it's always about the task. It's not about the big goals. It's about the task. And then, of course, they can evaluate the results when the task is over. One task can lead to another, and they can learn from each one as they go. Another thing they can do is raise their serotonin levels, which is going to help prefrontal cortex function, increase willpower. And so to increase serotonin, you need to be exposed to sunlight. Massage helps. Improve your microbiomes because they make serotonin. And now notice I said plural, microbiomes. Exercise, of course, helps with serotonin. And of course, thinking about happy memories. They also want to be aware. Awareness and mindfulness will help the prefrontal cortex override default habits. And affirmations, visualization, and positive self-reflection all help awareness. Again, this falls right into what we do. And number 7 is to celebrate the small successes. This keeps the dopamine flowing and supporting motivation. You want to shift attention away from the long-term goals and focus on the small everyday task. Positive social network, I mentioned this earlier. People can help your efforts or hurt them. And associating with people who have similar good habits makes it easier to maintain. And then finally, and this is for you as the practitioners, don't challenge clients' beliefs. Give another suggestion. I just had someone email me because she's working with a client who has hormone issues, and she wants to recommend soy for her because there's a lot of good research showing that soy can have some specific benefits. But the client believes that soy will exacerbate her hormone issues. And she's adamant. And I said, so don't recommend soy, recommend something else. All legumes have phytoestrogens in them. There are hundreds of foods that have phytoestrogens in them. You don't have to recommend soy. There's lots of other things you can suggest. So that's what you have to do. You're aware of what you're trying to accomplish with the recommendation. And if they don't like the one you give them another one that could do possibly the same thing. All right, nutrients for neuroplasticity. Magnesium is good for increasing plasticity in the prefrontal cortex. Cholesterol is critical for learning and memory, as well as healthy cell membranes. 25% of cholesterol is found in the brain, and it helps with hormone production. So, we've gone through a period of time where cholesterol was avoided in foods. And I know a lot of people don't avoid it, but many people do. And so you need to look at their diet and see if they're doing that. And as long as, if they're not a vegan, then you can recommend some foods with cholesterol in them to help. Turmeric and curcumin protects against free radical damage and promotes neurogenesis. And a rat study found that it improved neuroplasticity and reduced depression. Now, antioxidants are very important to protect brain cells, and it's usually the ones we make in our body, not so much the ones that we get from our food. And when I say get from our food, I'm not just talking about vitamins A, C, E, and selenium. I'm also talking about the phytonutrients. Many phytonutrients are very powerful antioxidants. They can help somewhat, but it doesn't really matter. If we are going to want to have more of the ones we make, we still need the nutrients from the food to make them. So it doesn't matter which way we look at antioxidants, either in the food or we're going to make them. we're going to get the materials from the food, so eat the food. B vitamins help neurotransmitter communication between nerve cell membranes. Omega-3 helps to regulate the balance of EFAs, lower inflammation, and increase brain function. And of course, you want to support the gut. Plays a big role in brain function. There's just more and more coming out all the time. How much? Okay, and by the way, there's a lung brain, there's a skin brain, like there's other brain axes, mouth brain. It's not just gut brain. We don't know yet, but we do know that supporting, the gut and other microbes in our body is always going to be a good thing. So to wrap up, change is complex. Think carefully what you ask a client to do. Keep the tasks small and let them experience them. And for you, it might be time to think about what you can't change and why. I'm always thinking about, okay, why am I where I'm at, and what's holding me back? What have I not, processed about what I'm doing that maybe I could change that would get me further to where I want to be? But change is possible, especially when it comes to supporting how the brain functions. And that's the end of the presentation. And I'm coming back to you. Okay. Detria says, is that why I wanted that salted caramel ice cream right now? Could be. And again, I was just having this conversation with a colleague today that I think it's essential that we recognize what gives us joy. And it isn't about having a perfect diet. It's about having joy in our life. So, we have to take all that into consideration. Okay, so I'm getting lots of thank yous. I'm assuming that means there's no questions. Whenever the thank you comes in, it usually generally means we're done and it's over and we've reached the end. I think this is a fascinating topic. I can't tell you. If you want the PDF slides, I'm going to put the link in again for those who came later. It'll take you to the page with the quiz and the references and everything. Okay. Debbie says, I found imagery a powerful tool for the smoker. Imagine your life smoke-free with specifically. I can see that helping. And Melanie says, I like to keep my mind active, cognitive activities, brain training games. Good plan. I think we all need to do that. think we need to put a special focus on that. And I think in the long run, we're going to see that it makes a difference. And if we can encourage our clients to do that, then it's great. Our brains want sugar due to all the thinking. Well, sugar's not the worst thing in the world. Depends on which sugar it is. Thank you. I really like the connection to why small steps are better for the brain to process. Like I said, it's an easier way to approach things with a client, and it works, and it has a brain reason for you to do it that way. These things, these theories, these things, they come from somewhere. And so sometimes they can provide some really useful, practical tips for us. And that's what we need. We don't need to be giving them a science lesson. We just need practical solutions that they can try. All right. Well, hello, Ola. I would say good to see you too, but I can't see you. It's good for you to be here. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. What's Melanie saying? Yes, small steps with change, but one's desire too. Of course, they have to want to do things. That's incredibly important. All right. I want you all to have a lovely evening and take care. And I'll see you when I do the next one. I am doing one next week that's kind of a follow-up to this in a bit because Functional Microbiome program is launching. I'm running a promotion for it starting next week. So the webinar to go with it is on microbes and mindset, which is going a little more detail into the gut and the other microbiomes connection to the brain. So that's next week. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening and take care.